Hey there, this is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. In this video, I'm going to be recreating Escapism by RAYE 070 Shake. I'm going to be sharing some music production tips along the way, so be sure to watch the whole video because there's going to be a tip or two that you might want to use in your workflow. So let me show you the finished result, and then I'll walk you through every step of the process, and then stay tuned to the end of the video because I got a special treat just for you. Now, if you're new to the channel, something that I often do is I'll take a popular song that's charting on radio, Spotify, or Apple Music, and I'll reproduce it, kind of just work backwards and break it down for the purpose of kind of unlocking some music production tips and techniques that you can use in your own projects. The goal isn't to just direct you over to the same exact patch, preset, or sounds that the artist or producer are using, but more or less unlocking the why behind it and the how so that you can use that in your projects and have the freedom to kind of recreate that on your own. So that's the whole purpose behind breaking these down. I think it's really helpful. And so if you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe to the channel and like the video so you can stay up to date with upcoming videos. Also, if you're an artist or a music producer or just wanting to learning how to produce your music, but you're looking for professional guidance to help you take that next step forward with your music, then I definitely recommend you check out beatacademy.com. And that's where I invest a lot of my time and energy in pouring into aspiring music producers and artists and helping them accomplish their music production goals. So if this sounds like you, then definitely visit beatacademy.com for more information. All right, let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, for the main lead, let's go ahead and start with Ableton Live's wavetable. You could follow along using any two or more oscillator synth that you might have in your DAW. We're going to start with a sawtooth as our source for oscillator 1. It's going to give us that nice, bright, buzzy type of sound. But we want to have that nice glissando, that glide from one note to the next. So first thing we're going to do is change that from polyphonic and over to mono and adjust the glide amount to my personal liking. Even right there, you get that nice West Coast lead type of sound. So now let's open up our second oscillator, turn that on, and also choose a sawtooth. We're going to cause a little bit of detuning here. So I'm going to detune this oscillator slightly. And just lower the volume of that here. So now we have two oscillators set to a sawtooth, one slightly detuned. Now, what's going to give it a little bit of texture to the sound is when we map the actual pitch to an LFO. So for this, I'm going to head over here into the matrix. I'm going to go to oscillator 1. I'm going to choose the pitch, and I'm going to route this all the way to the LFO here. And we're going to need to go to our mod sources and go to our LFO1. This is determining how we adjust LFO1 is going to determine the rate at which the pitch goes up and down. So let's really increase the rate. And then let's lower the amount. And you can kind of start slowing and backing off on the rate and adjusting the amount and the shape a little bit. But as you can see, this adds that little bit of tension and that vibrato that we hear in the pitch. So without it, very plain and straightforward, but just even increasing it just a little bit. Now, what's going to give this some width and a little bit more color and actually kind of smooth around the harsh edges of the sound is when you start to apply some unison. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and select the unison, and we're going to go with classic. We're going to go choose 4 voices and just start increasing the amount to where we like it. That's cool. Now I'm just going to give a little dimension. So I'm going to go over here to my audio effects, place a reverb on there. This is going to give some space. And after that, a bit of chorus to this. So I'm going to go to my pitch and modulation folder, add some chorus ensemble, and just a little bit, maybe just try the ensemble. And I might want to adjust the glide just a little bit lower and see where that gets me here. So let's go ahead and focus on the drums. Now, as I listen to the reference, I know I'm not going to dial in the same exact drum kit or sounds or, semi snare or kick drum. I'm going to get generally close to it. But I think more important than the actual sound is the actual vibe and overall groove. So I'm going to start with an acoustic drum set. And normally what I want to do is I want to have the nuances and the small details that get captured with an acoustic drum kit, such as Excellent Audio's Addictive Drums 2, like the room sound, the little inflections that happen there. And that's going to be my background beat. And then I'll layer that with a strong kick and snare to kind of have more of that foreground beat. So for the addictive drums, let's go and focus on that. And let's go and look at the pattern here. So that's the pattern that we've got going on. And I'm using a preset here, the modern soul and R&B drum kit with just some slight altercations. I bypassed the effects that were on here, lowering the snare a little bit. But this is really what I'm focusing on, this overhead and the room sound. That's what I'm really liking about using this acoustic drum kit. And then just using an overdrive plugin directly on there. And then I'm using an Analog Obsession plugin, amazing work that these guys are doing, using the DB comp. It's almost emulating the DBX 160 compressor that I really love using. And it does a great job, and it's free. So just using this to give it a little bit more control over the transients of the snare and the kick. So you can almost hear it when boom, go. It's a little disjointed. Then with the compressor on there, it's a lot more smoother and more glued. Now, as you're listening to this, you're thinking, wow, it sounds really thin. What's going on? Well, that's because I have it grouped to a drum bus, which then is using an EQ to shave off the low end. So with this, I then will layer this with a drum loop. And this is important because this is what really adds a lot of the character and nuance to a drum groove. If I just had, let's say, my acoustic drum kit and my layered drum beat, which is just the kick and snare, that's cool, that works. But now look what happens when we add the drum loop in the back. We capture all those little ghost notes, those little transitions between sounds to sound. So if you're ever struggling with like, man, my drum pattern just sounds too stiff, there's no life in there, sneaking in a loop in there, covering the same pattern can really help and create wonders. So draw it in here and just match the kick and snare pattern with my addictive drums. So I hope I'm not losing you here, but essentially what I'm doing is I want the drum beat to mirror the same drum beat of my live drums, which is this one here. Now I'm leaving all the little, like the hi-hats and the snare rolls and flams like that. I'm just cutting and editing so that the snare and the kick are playing the same pattern as the acoustic drums. And on my loop track, I have a sidechain compressor so that every time my main kick drum plays, it ducks this loop. And I also have an EQ to take away some of the low end. And that helps just clean this up so that it paves way for my main kick and snare, which is this right here. Now I'm also using Excellent Audio's XO. I think this has just been a really great plugin for me. Sometimes I can get really narrow-minded in my sound selection. I'll gravitate to the same 2 or 3 files or folders. Sometimes I might think I don't have any drums, when in case I have like hard drives filled of drums, right? We're always like, oh, I'm tired of those. So this makes it just a little bit more exciting for me to come across sounds that I might want to use. As you can see, this is just mapped out by different colors, and those colors are associated to sounds. Kicks are in red, snares in blue, and so on and so on. So as I kind of just navigate through different sounds, I'm like, all right, this one sounds pretty good, and I assign it to the kick and the snare palette here. A little bit of saturation on the overall kick and snare. And so now I have the whole drum bus going through the glue compressor, some saturator, some transient shaper, and a little bit EQing. Let me walk you through. First, let's check them all out. So this is the foreground, my EXO playing my kick and snare, the live acoustic drums, and the drum loop all together. And let me just bypass everything on the drum bus. Okay, so the compressor, really just to smooth this and glue these drums together, since I'm kind of packing them all in together. Saturator is what's really giving a lot of that harmonics, and honestly, this is where the tone of the drums come through as I listen to the reference. I have it set to medium curve. I really want to get some nice crunchiness. As a matter of fact, if I crank the bass knob here, love what it does to that kick drum, that low end, right? I get that nice crispy response from that. So I like what it's doing there. And then I have this transient shaper. Now, what's cool with transient shapers on a drum bus is if I leave it normal, I'm going to get more of the ambience. But if I want the drums to pop, I want to bring down the sustain and raise the attack. So and then I'm just using an EQ to kind of balance this out in context with all the other instruments. Now, I have a shaker track here, and this is being implemented on the second half of the arrangement, but I'm actually playing this live. And oftentimes what I like to do is I get my program drums and I'll incorporate maybe one or two elements of extra percussion that I can actually play and record on hand. So for instance, I've got this egg shaker here, something inexpensive, or you can just get like a can of beans or whatever it is, just a shaker. And I actually like recording it in. It just gets me excited about the whole process of combining an organic, recording alongside with my program drums. And then it just adds a little bit more to the timing as well. So this gives a little bit more traction as we start building up in the arrangement, adding some extra percussion. So I'll do this, I'll tap with some, pencils or whatever it is, but it's always cool to incorporate some kind of live organic tracking onto the drums in conjunction with the program drums there. It just gives a little bit more life. Now moving on to the piano. Piano's pretty straightforward, not doing a lot of tweaking to it, but I'm using the modern upright patch on XLN Addictive Keys. Really great sounding instrument. Actually just brought it up, left it the way it was, and just played the chords. Now I'm using the OTT multi-band compressor here in Ableton Live, but if you're following along using Logic or Pro Tools or another DAW, I know Slate Digital has created an MOTT plugin that really does exactly the same thing. But here's the thing. I don't normally use a lot of OTT, but the over-the-top compression, which is what this is really, really evidence in piano patches. That's especially when I'm doing a lot of EDM tracks and I want that nice crispy house type of piano sound. I like using this plugin on there and just I just pepper it lightly, but it does make a difference. It makes it a lot brighter and gets the tone that I'm looking for. So this is with it. I don't do too much of it because it thins it out. So I just want to be careful with that. I do like the brightness it brings, and so there you go. So just having that there, then I'm actually copying the same piano parts here. I'm clicking and dragging that right over to another MIDI track, which has the Artura B3 organ on here. Just looked for a clean organ patch. I think it's the clean rock organ. And this is what we have. So the piano gives more of that attack on the first initial chord, but the organ is the one carrying the weight for the sustain and the body. So, if knowing that, I might want a little bit more shimmer and attack from my piano and less of that from my organ, because the organ is going to be the body. The piano is going to be like the head of the sound, so to speak, the attack of it. And then layering that, I have my very own plugin called Orbit. This is our first Beat Academy exclusive virtual instrument. Really loving using this plugin here. But this is just loaded with some great sounds that I sound designed here, and to add some nice shimmer. And I'm going to have this pad layered with the organ. And so Orbit is just an extreme cheat code for getting that kind of nice, airy, crispy type of atmosphere. You can just easily just copy some pads or chord progressions you're doing, copy that, put an orbit on top of it, and you're good to go. I love the texture it's giving to both the piano, organ, and all together, this is what we have. So adds that nice ethereal and mystery to it. So, hey, if you want to download Orbit, it's yours absolutely free. It's a virtual instrument plugin that is both compatible for VST3 and audio units, so you can use it with Logic, both Mac and PC. Just simply click the link below in the description box or visit beatacademy.com/orbit to download this plugin today. All right, now let's head over to the horns. And the horns, pretty straightforward. I'm using Contact's factory library preset. I just went with a brass ensemble. Didn't want anything too crazy. And horns can be really tricky to get a really good, authentic response from when you're using a virtual instrument. So it's all about the velocity. It's all about how you go about connecting, making sure that the notes are legato and connecting from one to the other. So here's the actual part. Now, what I want to do is I make sure that my root note, the low note here, is set to a higher velocity than the chords. So that's what's going to give that nice, brassy, almost like that grit and that growl from this. If I lower the velocity of this note, it's there, but we don't get the pronounced growl that we want from the lower register. So I'm going to hold Command and click and drag up. That's what we're looking for. It might also be great to change the inversions, meaning the order of the notes that are being played in the chord than the piano. So I didn't just copy and paste the piano part over to the horn part. It would be a little too redundant. So instead, try playing the same chords, but just in a different, taking the notes and placing them in a different order. So instead of having E, G, and B, I might actually start on the G, B, and E, and a different inversion. So that gives a little bit of different voicing, and you can get a lot more life when you're starting to layer and combine sounds together that way as well. So I'm going to make sure that the lower notes all have the higher velocity, so we get that nice grit and growl from the bottom notes there. And I'm going to start to layer that with the other sounds. So let's go ahead and put this with the piano. And then right after the horns, I'm using an amp simulator. And this is really just to give a little bit more bite and just some harmonics and distortion here. So this is without it. It really helps the brighter part of the brass stick out more. And then I have a reverb plugin directly onto this, the brass here. And I'm using IK Multimedia's Sunset Sound, have it set to Live Room, Studio One. And just, I wanted to create more of a room sound, more other than the hall reverb that came stocked with the preset. It just gave a little bit of distance and helped send the brass a little further in the back. All right, next, let's get to the bass, which comes in second way right before the chorus comes in and adds a lot of weight to the arrangement. So for this, I'm going to be using another wavetable. Again, another 2 oscillator synth that you might have will do just the trick. So oscillator 1 is going to be set to a sawtooth, and oscillator 2 will also be set to a sawtooth, but we're going to go take the second oscillator and drop it a whole octave lower. So I'm using the cutoff frequency. Using the sawtooths as bass gives you more of a growly type of bass, as opposed to just a sine wave, which will be a lot more duller, but you'll get a lot more, low end focus there. I want to growl because this is going to give some presence to when the bass comes in, but then I'll separate and copy the same bass track, duplicate that over, and then just use another wavetable with just the sine wave so we can focus on the sub there. So I'm going to split them apart. So I have this one here with oscillator 1 set to a sawtooth, oscillator 2 set to a sawtooth, slightly detuned it, but that's a whole octave lower, and then made sure to switch it from polyphonic to mono so the notes don't overlap, and widen up the sound by switching over to classic. As you can see, I'm not doing a lot of unison here, but just a hint of it so it widens up a little bit. And then, drawing your attention here to this EQ, we're just shaving off the low end from this synth. Now, without the EQ, there is a good subtle low end presence there, and we can easily just raise the volume up for that, or maybe just put an EQ and raise the low end from this synth. But I wanted a little bit more control over the low end. So in this case, I'm just simply going to hit Command D and duplicate this whole track, and that's what we have here. So for this one, I turned oscillator 2 off, left oscillator 2 on, and went from a sawtooth to a sine wave. Also set that to mono. No unison here because we don't need to widen that up. And just brought an EQ to just focus in on the low end here. And this compressor is just to kind of control any of those resonance that might happen when the notes switch from a higher note to a lower note, and it starts to kind of resonate a little bit. That compressor is just used to kind of control any of that. I have a little bit more control of how much low end balance I can have on the track. Or if I wanted less of that buzzy presence of the bass, I can lower that without without compromising the low end. So that's the reasoning behind this, and that's why I kind of like separating the two like this. Well, let's see what it sounds like with everybody else coming in. Well, I hope this video was helpful and encouraging for you. And as I stated earlier, my gift to you for watching this video, I would love to send you Orbit. It's my first exclusive Beat Academy plugin, and it's a virtual instrument that I have taken the time to sound design and really does an amazing job of just adding some great texture to your pads or keys or just using it in general. It's just been great for me to add into my projects. It's pretty straightforward, as you can see here. You have 2 sound modules, planet A and planet B, and this controls the overall volume for sound 1 and sound 2. Amp envelope in the beginning to control it, a little bit of chorus, some space, and a filter. Very straightforward. I wanted it to be very simple to use, but yet very powerful and just a great sounding plugin. So go ahead and check it out. Feel free to just download this by clicking the link below in the description box or visit beatacademy.com/orbit. And you'll be able to access and download this plugin. There'll be a PDF file included in the zip file that will walk you through the installation process for this plugin. So looking forward to you using it. Comment below if you already have it and are using it. What's your favorite patch? What do you like about the plugin? And yeah, I'm super excited for you to check it out. So once again, beatacademy.com/orbit. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to the videos so you can stay up to date with upcoming videos, and I'll see you next time.